Welcome to Words of Wisdom from Kick-Ass Women.
Stories and advice about moving forward, punching through that glass ceiling, pushing harder, and blazing trails from women we really admire.
Welcome back to another episode of Words of Wisdom from Kick-Ass Women. And this is the space where we look to inspire, lead, and encourage everybody to just break through the barriers and be their best self. And nobody does that better than my special guest host today, Marie Newman. Pretty amazing woman, former Illinois Congresswoman. She is an author, she is a speaker, she is an activist, and so much more. And I'm always so excited to have you here with me. So welcome, Marie.
Thank you, and I'm so glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, and hopefully so is our guest, because I'm super excited to talk to her. Marie, I know you know all about how to tell stories with heart and sincerity and courage and to really kind of get to the truth behind the person that, you know, you're talking to or is the subject matter. And that's what our guest today is all about. It is journalist and filmmaker Mercedes Kane. So welcome, Mercedes. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. Good. How are you both?
Great.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. We're so excited to talk to you, and I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about Mercedes, and then we'll kind of get started. So Mercedes, like I said, fabulous journalist, filmmaker, recently published an article in National Geographic about, I got to be honest, a topic I knew nothing about. As the kids say today, I didn't know that was a thing. It's a thing, and it's memory choirs. And you'll have to tell us a little bit about that, because I just thought that was fascinating, and certainly I was super impressed to see it in National Geographic. So congratulations to that.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. She's also the president of Daisy May Films, which is her production company, where she produces documentaries that are award-winning. And a couple of note that are very recent. One is called Art and Pep, and it's the story of these two gentlemen who are partners for life and actually run the largest LGBTQ bar in the world, and it just happens to be in Chicago, which is super cool. And so it just kind of walks through their life and what they've done together and what it was like to be AIDS activists back in the beginning of all of that. And it's just a heartwarming story of these two individuals and their hard work, activism, and what that does to a relationship and to the world. So congratulations on that one. And then I also wanted to mention another one, Breakfast at Ina's. It's another super warm story about this incredible woman, Ida Pinkney. I hope I got that name right. So she's been known as the Breakfast Queen. And again, here in Chicago, she ran this breakfast diner for over 30 years. And what Mercedes focused on was how she was going to wrap up this business after doing it for 30 years. So please go and find these documentaries and check them out. And like I said, they're both award winners, so worth every minute of your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, and we're so glad to have you here. I think everybody should grab a cup of coffee, maybe a notebook. You might want to take some notes on this one. I think I'm going to, because she's an expert interviewer. And, we'll just kind of navigate between curiosity and maybe a little bit of intrusion. She's going to help us navigate how we get the truth out of the people that we're talking with, particularly if it's work-related. So let's just start at the very beginning, Mercedes. When you walk into an interview for the first time, whether you've got just a recorder or you've got a camera, how do you begin to build trust with that individual?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is really that the trust building always starts long before I walk into their room or before a formal interview does, because of the way that I work. And, it's really an immersive form of storytelling, whether that's in the written form, the documentaries I make, or even, largely for brands and clients that I do work for, I always really try to build a relationship with the person whose story I'm trying to tell ever before I have any camera on, any voice recorder on. I get on the phone with them or on a Zoom call, and I just chat with no recording just to start to understand who they are. I let them talk and I listen. I think listening is so important. And then I also explain, what my process is like and what kind of story I'm trying to tell, so that they're also not surprised when I show up. If I'm going to be following them around all day with a camera, or if I'm going to be, sitting in the corner observing them, they need to really know what they're in for, and also why it's worth putting themselves through that, because it can be uncomfortable, I think. And I think it's, they really need to sign on to the whole process, to the whole genesis of it, and, just kind of be ready to collaborate with me on it before I'm ever there with a crew or a camera or recorder. And then once I do show up, in that maybe more formal capacity, we already feel a connection of some sort, at least a little bit. They know what's in store. They know what to expect. I think, again, cameras can be really uncomfortable. But then I find that if I'm really fully engaged with the person, their story and their life, which I always am because I'm really curious. And, I often, if I'm selecting the topic, especially, I already know that I'm bought into it. But I think that people can really feel that authenticity or from the get-go. And, sometimes if people are a little more camera shy or maybe introverted, it might take a little time to get there. You don't always have time to keep shooting. With Art and Pep, we shot for, I think it was like 120 days altogether.
Wow.
So we had a lot of time to build that. But, sometimes I'm just on set for one day. So, but I think it's just truly that genuine interest that I have in their story that really can't be faked, but I think it can be felt by the people whose stories I'm trying to tell. And that really helps build that trust right off the bat and helps people feel okay being vulnerable because they really know I'm there for the right reasons, that I'm really curious about their why and their story.
Yeah, that vulnerability is really kind of the secret sauce, right? Is that usually your vulnerability is your truth. I remember many times throughout my career, and I have a background in marketing and advertising and politics. And when we are our most vulnerable, we are our most truthful, right? But it's frequently the hardest thing to be. So bravo to you.
Yeah. And it's so funny because what I think the rest of us kind of think about when we think about journalism is the aha moment. And what you're describing isn't about catching somebody in a moment. It's about helping them just get into an authentic space where they're comfortable enough, to give you the kind of information and content, that the rest of us are just kind of dying to know about. Can you give us a few more examples of how your presence maybe changes the energy so that you can help get people there faster?
Yeah, one experience that I often think about when I think about this is with Art and Pep. When I was directing that film, it really did take time to build trust with them. As you mentioned, they have been, Art Johnston and Pepe Pena, they've been a couple for over 50 years now. It was like 40 something when we were filming, but, they've been activists. They've been well-known bar owners in Chicago, but their personal life was really something that they wanted to keep private. They had never opened it up to anybody for many reasons, but it was sort of a sacred thing for them. And so, when I sat down to originally tell the story, they loved the reasoning behind it, the why that we wanted to tell the story. And I could tell they wanted to be cooperative and good sports because they believed in that vision. But it did take time to get them to a point where they could be comfortable being themselves, showing their love and kind of ignoring the cameras as much as possible. And I think that really happened when the COVID-19 pandemic began, because we started shooting before COVID. And we had a whole different kind of story arc in mind. And then COVID happened and it kind of flipped everything on its head. And we had to figure out, do we put the cameras away and regroup, which we did for like 2 weeks when we thought it was a 2-week thing. But then we very quickly realized, no, this is actually a really important time to film because of what they had gone through with AIDS. And, the bar had been shut down for 40 days for the first time ever. It had never been shut down one day.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And so we really had to sort of pod up with Art and Pep. And my husband was actually the cinematographer for the film. But even our two kids, we just sort of like we spent a lot of time with them. And at one point, if you've seen the film or if you haven't, Art gets really ill from COVID. I mean, to the point that he's hospitalized. He almost died. It was incredibly scary, especially as you can imagine for Pep. And it was the longest they'd ever been apart. Pep, for the first while, couldn't go into his room. And, my husband and I were genuinely worried just as people, and people who had been cared really deeply for them by this point. But we also felt as filmmakers that we also needed to capture this as it was happening. And Pep was like very hesitant about that. He sort of did not, he was going through a lot, as you can imagine. It's like thinking about going through one of the hardest moments of your life and someone wanting to put a camera in front of you. And so, we would often just have him over for dinner. And so one night he was over for dinner and I realized I sort of had to have this talk with him because I just felt it was so important to show this. And so, to be honest, like that night, I got emotional. I was vulnerable. I was like in tears. And, I just told him that I felt like the audience really needed to see them during this unimaginable and vulnerable time to really understand their love story and that whole journey that they had gone through to get to this point, surviving the AIDS crisis while so many of their loved ones did not. Fighting for the rights that even allowed Pep to be at the hospital, be in the room eventually with Art as his husband, and then also facing this other pandemic together. And so I kind of like laid it all on the line and just really told him that, I didn't feel like I could tell their story in the way it deserved to be told if they weren't really, especially him. I mean, Art was pretty out of it. But if he wasn't really, willing to let us into kind of the scary, messy part in real time. And by the end of that conversation, we were both crying. And the next day we were following Pep to the hospital with a camera. And, I think that happened because, again, like I led with my heart. I spoke from this place of honesty. I had genuine intentions for it and felt like it was important. And so it was tough, though. It was like really tough to sort of be asking that of someone who's going through such a difficult moment for a kind of greater vision,
I'm sure that was very rough because, you're a whole being, right? When you're a director, you are a human and that's your friend. But then you also understand for other people, it's important to get that story out there. And I know I have the great honor of knowing Art. He's a lovely human being, and his bar has hosted literally thousands of events for free to help many causes, starting with AIDS, but in politics and many things. So he's just a lovely human being. But I also know he spent most of his career shining a light on other people. He's a very kind of introspective, reserved guy. And so he's not used to being in the spotlight. So I'm sure that was a little bit to pull him out as well. And then obviously Pep as well. But I'm sure it took a little bit. So what do you think was the little key that unlocked Art? Do you remember a moment going, oh, I just unlocked him?
Oh, good question. Art, that is very true. Art is definitely more extroverted in a way. That's not even the right word. Art is more comfortable speaking in public than Pep. Pep is he's the VJ at Sidetrack, kind of the visionary behind show tunes. And, so he's very social with his people, but Art is he wasn't always the one to speak out. And I actually think it's interesting. I think part of it was when Art realized that he had been the voice for so long of especially the activism, and he realized that this film was going to be called Art and Pep. And it was when he realized finally Pep is also going to be up on the stage with me telling the story. I think that eased him into a comfortability. This is about something more than just, me on a stage advocating for someone else. This is a deeper story. And I think he did. That did help it click for him, if that makes sense.
Displaying their love story is so important, right? It's not so just important. The story of their activism, and their love story is so beautiful and needs to be known to everybody, right? Particularly right now. When did it already debut? Mercedes?
Yeah, it came out in 2023, and it was interesting because we, got into all these film fests and we traveled across the country. Actually, they went across the world. They even went to Europe, to places.
Nice.
I know, it was wonderful. And, at this point, I mean, obviously with politics and, you see that these rights are very fragile, but you do think like younger generations have kind of seen it all, right? But we would encounter so many college kids. Like we had a screening by Penn State, and these kids who would come up to them and be like, I've never seen a love story of two men who've been together for 48 years. Like, I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
And just like how inspired they were by that. And it's funny because there was another scene in that movie too, where we kept for months, I'd be like, okay, we want to be with you guys. Like when you go to bed and be in your room with you and show that, and then be with you when you wake up in the morning, like you're doing your morning. And they were like, yeah, okay. And they would just like blow us off. I mean, to the point that one time we showed up in the morning just to even try to get the morning scene, and they came out fully dressed, and we were like, no. So
you guys,
go back and get jammies on.
They were being polite, but they were like, did not clearly want this to happen. Yeah. And I had, again, sort of had this like moment with them where I was like, if we were producing a film about a man and woman, like we would show them in bed together.
Right.
We would show them cuddling and having this intimate moment and being like, if we leave this out of this film, that is like a travesty. Like people need to see this part of your love story. And I know it's uncomfortable. And so we got them in there, and it was like it's my favorite moment of the film. And it's so beautiful. And Art talks about like how he's leaning on Pep and how he's leaned on him for all these years. And I mean, after the film came out, Art would often say at Q&As, like, letting you in bed with us was the best thing we've ever done.
Love it.
Great line. Yeah. You know what I'm finding fascinating about all of this in this story is that, and it really didn't occur to me too much, but filmmaking and probably journalism as well has to be really flexible. You know, you talked about changing the entire arc of the story because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I guess a two-part question. How often does that happen? And Marie loves process. That's like her favorite thing. Do you follow processes in those moments?
Yeah, I think it's like kind of like a yes and. I mean, I think that there's probably never really a time where you actually set out to tell a story a certain way and it exactly goes that way. But I do always have a very strict plan going into it. You know, like I always want to have like a framework for like a beginning, middle, and end, where I'm trying to go with it. And then just be ready for things to take turns. Because I think like that's just, it's going to happen. It's real, you know, these are real life stories with real people, and literally anything can happen. I mean, the pandemic was like the extreme of that, but you know, in every story that can absolutely happen.
Yeah, it seemed to change the arc of almost everybody's story. So
I know.
Yeah, that it, you know, did for Art and Pep in such an extreme way is unfortunate, but yeah, we totally understand what that was like. So, wow. You know, the other thing that I think is a big takeaway for our listeners as I've been, you know, really engaged in the stories that you're telling us is that it's really about being able to share a spotlight, right? You know, we all understand what active listening, the importance of active listening today, but the concept of share the spotlight and collaborate really kind of comes to the top in all of what you do.
Yeah. I don't know, dear.
Was there a question in there? No, not really.
Sorry.
That's a good thought, though. I do related to that. That's such a good insight, Liz. Related to that, so you've told us now a time where you took a big risk, right, Mercedes? You went and really pressed it in a time of danger of health, danger of betraying their trust, right? Because there was the danger of that when you walked into them saying, hey, we want to do either this bedroom scene or we want to really get into the weeds in the COVID situation, right? Because that's a huge risk because they could walk away from it, right? You know, so conversely, has the subject of any of your films or any of your work said, hey, we're not getting the whole story here. you're not going deep enough. We need to do this, and this is really important. So is there anywhere where, in the spirit of co-creating, has there been a time when they've pushed you to be more vulnerable and more truthful?
I don't know that that's ever happened exactly. I think it comes back a little bit to sort of that building of trust and setting intentions in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like we sort of are on a journey from the beginning of like, this is why I think your story is important. This is what I think people will get from it. It's like, I really love to present like the bigger picture to the people, because I feel like so many of us were living our day-to-day lives, right? And we're not really thinking about what we're doing and how that might inspire other people, or how that might be important, or how that might have a dramatic arc,
Right.
And so sometimes I think as a filmmaker, you have to go to them with why we think this is important. And, there's I'm working on a short documentary right now, which is about Pitcher, Oklahoma, and this community of people who were displaced from their homes about 20 years ago because of toxicity from mining and these giant chat piles that are in the town. But the people love their city so much that like they are devastated that they were made to leave. And they, I think so much of it is that, the government didn't value them or their city or, what they wanted. They really felt forced out. And there's been a lot of coverage of this area about the environmental loss, about kind of like the most toxic town in America. It's been a little sensationalized, not everywhere, but it's just been focused on that. And the people, when I talked to them, like, again, I got on a Zoom first and started talking to them, this woman, Paula, who's featured very prevalent in it. And she was like, no one has told the story of us. No one has told the human side of this story. Everything is about, the environmental, how toxic it is, and no one's talking about us. And so the story we're focusing on is, the broader picture, of course, but it's also it's about this Christmas parade that Paula and these other women put on every year still through a ghost town.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in Pitcher, but there's a parade every year and thousands of people come back from all over who've been displaced, and they come and they celebrate what community means to them, in a place that means a lot to them. And so, it's like, I don't know if that was necessarily them pushing me. I mean, I kind of had that idea for the parade in the first place. But when Paula told me that, no one's told our story, I definitely leaned in. And, it's a tricky story in a little bit of a way because, just the way that it's shaped how they feel about politics and trusting the government and science even is valid in a lot of ways. And I think it's every time I've asked, dug into something a little bit, I always come back to like, why am I telling the story? And it's to tell the human side of it, So I think like her framing of why the story is important to her helped me frame how it can be important to other people. And it almost became more about, the displacement in the community and then the beauty of this parade than it did about the environmental implications or any of that stuff.
Right. The sense of community is the story, right? Like, that's what always fascinates me. What brings people together to create community? Because it can be anything, right? And so that's just a testimony to that. So brava.
Yeah.
It's such a great topic. I mean, we're going to have this documentary on our radar for sure. Can't wait for it already. And it's so funny when I think about how all of us view like entertainment and even watching a documentary. We're kind of, like I had said at the beginning of this conversation, we're all kind of waiting for the tell-all, right? So how are you balancing, these individuals are telling you it's about their story. And then it's about how that community comes together every year for, this parade in an empty town that is filled to the brim. But how do you also bring the entertainment element into the work that you do in these documentaries?
I mean, I think that part is not as hard as you would think, just because like human experiences are sort of entertaining, right? Like naturally. And it's hard because it's a hard situation. I mean, there's a lot of like, for this one in particular, there's a lot of like emotion and they've gone through a huge hardship. And there's another woman, Rebecca, who is Native American there and who is still fighting for the surrounding areas and their sort of the environmental implications that live on. And so it's like a hard, but it's sort of like the building up to this parade and the human stories that are woven within this larger story. And then having this beautiful moment of seeing the parade kind of come to life, that it becomes sort of like pulling on your heartstrings. You just can't help it, but really kind of fall in love and be able to relate to these folks. It's like, really the true gift to me of storytelling, and the true impact is that we're so much more like, let me say that again. We're so, I can't phrase this right. We are more alike each other than we realize. It's like we have the same, we have so many similarities between people in Pitcher, Oklahoma, or Art and Pep, or, like people in memory choirs. It's like, I feel like the world is so divided right now. And really the magic of storytelling is that it just brings us right back in to having those commonalities and to being inside people's worlds.
And you talked a lot about, how environment or situations might change the trajectory of the story that you're going to tell. Are there ever situations where you build this trust with these individuals and that changes the trajectory of the story? It sounds like these women may have done some of that with this next film.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's interesting about Pitcher is that they were very distrustful of media. A little bit, like even we're like trying to gather archival, and people are protective because they haven't loved the way that they've been covered in the media. And, I do feel a responsibility to that, and also a responsibility of telling the truth. So at the end of the day, I can only hope that I'm telling an authentic story, and so that it will resonate with them. But yeah, I think again, for me, myself, it's like coming in with the right intentions. Like I always sort of like set the intention of why I'm telling the story, and I always try to let that lead me. And then I always also try to put myself in the position of the people that I'm covering. What would I feel comfortable with? How will whatever I'm covering impact the ultimate story? And, would I feel that my comfortability in that moment, or maybe discomfort in that moment, is worth it ultimately? Is it helping drive that story forward? So I think the actions I take ultimately depend on the answers to that question. And again, I think at the end of the day, we're all humans, and I want my stories and storytelling to reflect that human experience without overly interfering with it.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, what you're telling all of us and our listeners is that, empathy and open-mindedness are also two very important components to build trust. And trust doesn't have to just be something that we relegate just to people that we're trying to work with. We want everybody in our communities and, in our lives to trust us. And so we just need to open up with empathy and be open to establishing some of that with one another. So I think those are great lessons, Mercedes.
Speaking of lessons, I have to ask you, because you're one of those masters at your craft, right? And you don't have to do a humble brag with us. Your work is compelling. What piece of advice do you have for folks that are, on the upward curve of mastering their craft, or at the top of their game, that keeps you going? I think I know the answer, but I'll be curious to.
Oh, interesting. For me, my advice is truly just like I tell my children this, it's just listening. Like I feel like listening more and talking less has taught me so much and helped guide my career in every facet. It kind of maybe sounds cliche, but I really feel like the art of listening has gotten lost these days, especially with phones and technology. And, also this whole like concept of all of us being center stage and putting the camera on ourselves and our own stories instead of listening to what others have to say. I think when you really listen and hear people, and it helps you open up your mind, it helps open up opportunities for connection, for storytelling, for truth. I just think listening is such a powerful tool that we all have at our disposal.
I don't feel like it's a cliche at all. I feel like it's something we're actually just learning about. Now all of a sudden, and we hear it a lot in business, that we need to listen more and talk less. And it's like brand new information sometimes just to be an active listener, or even to understand how to be an active listener. So hopefully you're on to something there, and it's feeling maybe new to a lot of the folks that are listening today. So Mercedes, we can't thank you enough. I'm just going to recap a couple of things real quickly, because I think there were some huge takeaways from our conversation today. And of course, first, we all learned that, trust isn't given. It is something you earn by, coming with empathy and understanding and learning about anybody that you're working with or talking to, or is the subject of some of the things that you're doing. So that's a huge one. And of course, we need to understand that the best stories and the best things that we do in life are co-created, right? So it's never going to be the way you set out or maybe envisioned, but as long as you're open to the flexibility, it'll just get better, right? I really loved that part of our conversation. And then, of course, unexpected trust really can lead to opening brand new doors, like you found with, the women that you're working with, that were displaced by the way we were treating our own environment. So major big learnings. I can't thank you enough for being with us today. It was such a pleasure. And very quickly, tell us how to keep an eye out for this new documentary that's really cool sounding, and then where people can get in touch with you and see your work.
Yeah, sure. My website is daisymayfilms.com. And then, Instagram, I'm Mercedes M. Kane, Kane. And I will definitely be posting updates there, as well as different pieces I'm writing, and the Memory Choir story too, you can find there as well. So
Great.
Thank you.
Love
it's great to talk to both of you.
Thank you so much. It was a delight.
We enjoyed it. No doubt about it. Thank you. I just really want to quickly also thank our sponsor today, the Motion Agency. They're a marketing communications firm. They are the largest women-owned independent marketing communications firm, probably in the nation, but for sure in Chicago. So please check them out. They're a very cool company. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining us today. We can't wait to do another episode with you soon. So keep kicking ass and keep coming back. Thanks.